Calaroga Shark Media. Hello and welcome to Murder Weekly. This episode is titled The Subway Horrors.
Detective Jack "Sip" Malloy stepped onto the grimy platform of the 42nd Street subway station, the stench of urine and despair assaulting his nostrils. He grimaced, memories of the blackout of '77 flooding back. He'd been trapped down here for hours, the darkness punctuated by the screams of terrified passengers and the eerie whispers of a madman claiming to have seen a ghost. But it was the subway slasher that had left the deepest scars on the city's psyche. The call had come in an hour ago. A body found in the tunnel, torn to shreds. Sip had hoped he'd never have to set foot in this subterranean hell again, but the job had other plans. Well, if it ain't Sip Malloy," a gruff voice called out. Sip turned to see Detective Tony "Bulldog" Moretti, a veteran of the transit police, sauntering towards him. "Thought you'd sworn off the subway after that blackout fiasco." Sip shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "What can I say, Bulldog? The city keeps pulling me back in." Bulldog led Sip down the platform, past the huddled masses of the homeless and the glassy-eyed stares of the junkies. "Gotta warn you, Sip, this one's a mess. Been on the job 30 years, never seen anything like it." As they approached the crime scene, the acrid smell of blood and viscera grew stronger. Sip steeled himself, his mind flashing back to the reports he'd read on the subway slasher. The brutal efficiency of the kills, the trophies taken from each victim. The body lay sprawled across the tracks, a tangle of limbs and entrails. The head had been severed at the neck, the eyes gouged out, leaving behind gaping, bloody sockets. Sip crouched down, his eyes scanning the scene. "Victim's male, mid-30s. Any witnesses?" Bulldog nodded towards a group of shell-shocked passengers huddled together near the platform's edge. "Take your pick. We got a Wall Street hotshot who's gonna need a new suit, a couple of tourists who picked the wrong day to visit the Big Apple, and a bag lady who keeps mumbling about the devil in the shadows." Sip approached the witnesses, his badge held high. "Detective Malloy, NYPD. Can you tell me what you saw?" The Wall Street type, his expensive suit splattered with blood, spoke up first. "I was just minding my own business, waiting for the train. Then this thing comes tearing out of the tunnel, all blood and screams. I thought it was a frigging zombie or something, man." The tourists, a middle-aged couple from the Midwest, clung to each other, their faces ashen. "We heard the screams," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "It was like something out of a horror movie. And then we saw the body. Oh God, the blood." Sip turned to the bag lady, her weathered face etched with a lifetime of hard knocks. "What about you, ma'am? You see anything?" The woman's eyes darted around wildly, her gnarled hands clutching at her tattered coat. "The devil, he was here. I seen him with his black eyes and his bloody claws. He come up from the depths hungry for the flesh of the living." Sip exchanged a glance with Bulldog, who shrugged. "Hey, in this city, anything's possible." And then, a break, a tipster, a former junkie with a penchant for lurking in the subway tunnels, had seen a man fleeing the scene of the latest murder, a man with a distinctive tattoo on his forearm, a serpent coiled around a bloody knife. Sip and Bulldog hit the streets, shaking down every lowlife and snitch they could find, and finally, they had a name. Vincent "Viper" Russo, a small-time thug with a rap sheet longer than the Broadway line. They found him in a seedy bar on the Lower East Side, his eyes narrowing as the two detectives approached. Sip slapped the cuffs on him, a grim smile on his face. "Viper Russo, you're coming with us. We've got some questions about your little subway hobby." In the interrogation room, Sip and Bulldog went to work, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead like a strobe light in a cheap horror flick. Viper sat across from them, his eyes defiant, his lips curled into a sneer. "I ain't saying nothing without a lawyer," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. Sip leaned in, his face inches from Viper's. "You really want to play that game, Russo? We've got witnesses placing you at the scene, and that pretty little tattoo of yours matches our Vic's description to a T." Viper laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think I'm stupid enough to leave witnesses? And this ink? It's a common design, man. You gonna arrest every guy in the city with a snake on his arm?" Bulldog slammed his fist on the table, the metal reverberating with the force of the blow. "Cut the crap, Viper. We know you're the subway slasher. The only question is, you gonna confess now or after we find the trophies you took from your victims?" Viper's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face before he masked it with bravado. "Trophies? Man, you cops are even sicker than I thought. I ain't no serial killer, and I sure as hell ain't taking no trophies." Sip and Bulldog exchanged a glance, frustration etched on their faces. They'd been so sure, so certain that Viper was their guy, but something wasn't adding up. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sip opened it to find a well-dressed man in a tailored suit, a briefcase in his hand. "Detective Malloy, I'm Jacob Sterling, Mr. Russo's attorney. This interrogation is over." Sip's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "Your client was just about to confess to multiple homicides, counselor. You sure you want to pull the plug now?" Sterling smiled, a shark's grin that made Sip's skin crawl. "My client has nothing to confess to, detective. And unless you have actual evidence linking him to these crimes, I suggest you release him immediately." Sip knew he was beaten. Without a confession or hard evidence, they had nothing to hold Viper on. Reluctantly, he uncuffed the suspect, watching as he rubbed his wrists and shot the detectives a smug grin. As Viper and his lawyer walked out of the interrogation room, Sip's frustration boiled over. He grabbed a chair, hurling it against the wall with a roar of rage. The metal clattered to the floor, a twisted heap of impotent anger. Bulldog placed a hand on Sip's shoulder, his voice low and steady. "Easy, partner. We'll get him. It's only a matter of time."
Murder Weekly is a Calaroga Shark media production. Written and hosted by Aidan I. Flanagan. Produced by Mark Francis. Executive producers, Mark Francis and John McDermott. Portions of this podcast may have been created with the assistance of AI. Calaroga Shark Media.